So, Bruce, last week we were talking to Mike Anderson about intelligence, specifically human intelligence, right? But this week we're going to push the envelope a little bit further, because we're going to talk about what happens when we outsource our intelligence, our decision-making, our problem-solving, even our creativity to machines, robots, and computers. We're going to talk about, in other words, artificial intelligence and all the issues, the conundrums and the moral dilemmas that gives rise to. For example, think about this, right? If we were in a relationship, not me and you, right, but generally, right? If we were in a relationship and we decided to have it off with a sexbot, would it count as cheating, right? That's an interesting question, isn't it? One day, here's another dilemma. Will computers become so intelligent that we end up putting more value on their lives than we do on our own? In fact, one day, and I know you and I have talked about this before, Bruce, haven't we? Will computers just take over from humans and we just become total irrelevancies? It's a scary prospect, isn't it? Now,
it is a scary prospect, and I mean, I'm intrigued as to whether or not with artificial intelligence, we're just reinventing the wheel, but just smarter.
Yeah.
Will intelligent machines have to invent God?
Well, now that's an interesting question, isn't it? Will they come up with some kind of concept of God? Will it even kind of give us, some kind of insight into who God is?
Because we question our existence as human beings. We say, why are we here? What are we here for? What's the meaning of life? There's 42, as any machine will know.
That's right, yeah.
But would a super intelligent machine actually have the same existential crisis? Would it say, why am I here? Why do I exist? What's the point of it all?
Yeah. And what would, if they did come up with the concept of God, what would their God be? It wouldn't be the idea of the Christian God, would it? I mean,
we don't know. We don't know. I mean, anyway.
We do know a man who does.
We do know a man who does.
He might know Arthur Miller.
A Death of a Salesman.
I think he is writing a play, funny enough. I think he is writing a play at the moment.
As you'll find out, as we will all find out.
But he's not that Arthur Miller,
He's
folks.
not that Arthur Miller, no.
No, Arthur Miller is Emeritus Professor of History and the Philosophy of Science at University College London, and he is the author, not of plays, but he is the author of a number of books, including Colliding Worlds, The Artist in the Machine, and The Creativity Code. Now, he's going to have the answer to some of these questions, Bruce. Whether he's going to be able to put our minds at rest is another matter, or whether he's even going to be willing to put our minds at rest is another matter. But when it comes to artificial intelligence and creativity, he's definitely the go-to man. So should we get him on, mate?
Yeah.
Arthur, welcome to Psycho Schizo Espresso. Well, I'll tell you, look, honestly, Arthur, Bruce and I have really been looking forward to this, haven't we, Bruce? This is one of those where I think we've both got a great interest in this subject, haven't we?
Yes. I mean, I'm looking at the unemployment line potentially here.
Well, yeah, exactly right.
If it all goes well, and there's a whole bunch of questions that about artificial intelligence, AI, and moving into robotics and everything else. And I suppose there's one fundamental question, which I don't suppose any of the three of us could answer at the moment, or,
I'll give it a try.
I'll give it a try.
What are we for? What's the purpose of humanity?
Well, that's actually a good question. I thought we'd get to that after building up to it somewhat. But what are we for? Well, looking into what the future seems to hold, and it's very dangerous to predict more than 5 years into the future these days with AI. But let's do it anyway. There will come a time when machines will evolve that have the same emotions and consciousness and creativity as us. They'll be duplicates of us. These machines will be as smart as us. And at that point in time, the line between artificial or machine intelligence and human or natural intelligence will blur, and there will be only intelligence. Okay, then this is the big thing. Beyond, maybe not too far beyond that, there will appear machines that are much, much, much smarter than us. That will be the age of artificial superintelligence. And these machines may even have a set of emotions and a consciousness that differs from ours in some way we cannot even imagine. But that's fair enough, since machine physiology differs from our physiology. Right now it's silicon. Who knows what it will be in the future? But one thing is for sure, that these machines will have a creativity that far, far surpasses ours, because machines have the potential for unlimited creativity. Okay, here comes your question. Well, what's our role going to be in all this? Are we going to be household pets? Well, I mean, that's what most dystopian scenarios claim, and that need not be the case. Unfortunately, these scenarios are very popular. But that's a very complex question, what our role will be, because by that time, the notion of what it is to be human will have been dramatically transformed, because we are merging with machines.
Okay.
In fact, we're merging with machines already. And merging with machines may not be a bad idea, because that may be the path for the survival of the human race, whatever human will mean by that time. Because machines can look into the future, sense problems, and immediately work on them, something that we don't seem to be very good at. And I wrote my book, and my outlook on AI is an upscale outlook. It's not a dystopian outlook. It's an outlook in which it may well come to pass. In fact, it will come to pass that AIs will better our lifestyle. Now, my interest in AI has always been on the creative side. That is to say, AI creating art, literature, and music. And I think if we focus on raising machines with the message of creativity, then machines will be more beneficent than might be the case. But at any rate, I don't see right now any dystopian scenarios, because things will change rapidly. I mean, who knew 20 years ago that machines that the world would be as it is now?
Do you have any time frame? I mean, I know you said 5 years is a long time in this domain, but and I know you alluded to the fact that we are already subtly accepting that machines are integral to the way our brains function. As in people not having any memory anymore, they just leave it in their phone. Their inability to
Our
read
brain
maps.
is an information processing
Yeah,
system, just like a machine.
yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
we are machines essentially.
Yeah. So thinking about the human as its physical, its physicality, the physicality of Homo sapiens, which hasn't really evolved that much in a long, long time. We evolve at a very slow rate compared to everything else.
Well, actually, we're beginning to evolve at a very fast rate, because chip implants in the brain,
Now, that's what I mean. No, but that's
things of that sort bring us along. It goes against the million years of 100 million years of Darwinian evolution.
Yeah, no, but that's what I'm referring to, is that if you left human beings to their own devices, or rather,
No pun
human beings
intended.
human beings with other devices, if you left them to our own devices, we would evolve painfully slowly, and in fact, emotionally speaking, we've hardly evolved at all, which is now putting serious stress on the future of the planet and the future of our own species, because
Right.
we're in the process where we could quite happily self-destruct. Now, at what point do we start seeing human beings? Because referring to things like art, creativity, science, things like that, where we start referring to hybrid humans, and where humanity itself does not become primary as a sort of as an ethic, if you like. Where are we in terms of time frame before that occurs?
Well, if you want to look at it in terms of machines, okay, with machines, there will probably be artificial general intelligence by the end of this century.
Okay.
Machines being as smart as us.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no problem with us evolving at that point in time. But going beyond that, yes, there are problems with us evolving. Now, your question is a very complex one. There's various levels to it, and it is a fact that it's not an even sea. Some people are just smarter than others, and certain facets of creativity can't be taught. You either have them or you don't. And two of them are discovering a new problem, and another one is seeing connections between disciplines that don't seem to have any connection with each other. And there you're looking at a level of people of the ilk of Einstein. But I also include, of course, artists, musicians, and writers who could also make advances that change the direction of their fields. Only it's less extreme. I mean, among humans, we have Picasso, who changed the direction of art. He was a domain buster. And then you have in music Bach, Mozart, Stockhausen, Glass, Reich. And in literature, you have Samuel Richardson, who invented the novel in the 18th century. That was a wow experience.
Yeah.
And in writing, Arthur Mallarmé, Stéphane Mallarmé, and Arthur Rimbaud, who went against the going style of realism. And you ask Kant, are machines capable of making those great advances, those almost discontinuous advances? And actually, machines have the potential to do so, because all text and equations can be turned into numbers, and numbers are grist for the mill of artificial neural networks. So go ahead.
Arthur, I was just about to say, Bruce was talking about timeframes, and just on the basis of what you were saying there, do you yourself regard this, this kind of outsourcing of intelligence and creativity to computers and to machines? Do you regard that? Let's say that, as you say, that machines will become eventually much smarter than us, arguably much more creative than us. We'll come on to that in a minute. But do you yourself regard that as part of natural selection as we know it so far, as, say, Darwin, for want of a better word, intended the meaning of that phrase? Or do you see the development of artificial intelligence, artificial superintelligence, to be outside the normal parameters of natural selection? How do you see that kind of development?
That's a very good question. If you want to look at artificial, look at selection on an evolutionary side, then machines will win out, but we're merging with them, so it's not that bad. Right now, collaboration is big, where machines, in instances, for example, in AI created music, where machine and a human musician bootstrap each other's creativity. For example, there's a device that is called an AI device called Continuator, in which you have a human being sitting at a piano and improvising, and the train of notes is fed to Continuator, which parses them into phrases. Then these phrases are sent to a phrase analyzer, which looks for patterns, and in that way, the AI device creates almost instantaneously an improvisation in response to the human musician's improvisation. And what's interesting here is that improvisation is usually described as a conversation between a musician and a musical instrument. And here it's a conversation between a musician and an AI. And you have similar conversations with algorithms, such as AlphaGo, which in 2016 trounced a highly regarded Go master. And everyone agreed at that point that the venerable game of Go, 2,500 years old, had been cracked by a machine. I mean, that was another wow moment in AI. The Chinese consider it to have been their Sputnik moment. And now, just one other thing. Now we have, almost quickly, you have a machine evolved called AlphaZero, which now AlphaGo learned how to play Go by studying over 30 million board positions taken from games played by Go masters. AlphaZero learned Go and chess just by having it fed the rules. And that's all. Never had any contact with a human being. And AlphaZero plays chess and Go in a totally otherworldly way. It plays chess by immediately the queen comes out and starts running all over the board. And that doesn't go until late and middle game or end game. And so players who played chess against AlphaZero and Go too have said it's like communicating with an alien, it's a harbinger of things to come when we'll be communicating with aliens, ETs.
Well, with respect to board games and game theory like that, then, so if you have two equally equipped, let's say AlphaZero plays AlphaZero at chess, are we just basically looking at a game of tic-tac-toe?
No, not really. In fact, from my understanding is that those games are really boring. They go on and on and on.
Well, that's what I mean. It's like noughts and crosses. It's forever a draw.
That's right, because they have it. That's right. It's like checkers.
Yeah.
There's a lock on the game, or tic-tac-toe. There's a lock on that game too.
So we're hoping you are enjoying our little chat on Psycho Schizo Espresso. But don't forget, we do have a special thing for you. If you want to pay £4 a month, you can become a Patreon, which means you get the unedited content, you get the extra long episodes, and we're even going to come up with some special stuff for you. You can become a Patreon if you want at www.patreon.com/Psycho Schizo Espresso. And now, back to the music.
You were talking about Go there. You were talking about the computer that had learned the rules of Go. Learned to play the game of Go just by studying a database of Go games. And I think the same was true. Was there something called Deep Dream, which had been developed by Google, which had learned to write music? It didn't.
That's something else. Deep Dream is an algorithm that runs on an artificial neural network that produces images that you would never have thought of before. I mean, the whole deal with AI creativity is that AIs will produce art, literature, music, which presently you cannot imagine, and that's what Deep Dream did.
What was the algorithm or the computer that I think it had access? It wasn't taught the rules of music, but it studied a database of like 5,000 pop songs.
They all do that.
Oh, do
they?
Okay,
they all do that.
Okay,
yeah,
and it came up.
It finds patterns and finds chord progressions and things like that. There is there's an AI device now which I've written about quite a bit called Shimo. It's a robot concocted at Georgia Tech.
Yeah.
And the version right now plays along with a human. It listens and it responds and has movements, almost as if it's a human jazz player, which is helped by a faceplate. Yeah. And it has gone through one more advance in that it now writes music and composes music and writes the words too. So it writes the music. It's fed. It's supplied. It's trained on over 50,000 pieces containing jazz and etc.
Yeah.
But then you need an input sentence. You don't have creativity from end to end right now on computers. So somebody will say rain.
Yeah.
That's the prompt word, and then it will compose this really weird set of lyrics stemming from that word rain.
Yeah.
And it isn't bad. It sings it and has a mouth that moves. There's eyebrows there, metal eyebrows that raise and lower. And it goes out on tour. People pay to see
Arthur, I was just thinking, if you were to, Bruce, here's an idea. If you were to input like all of the Iron Maiden catalogue into like a computer, like you're saying, could it come out? Could it look at all the patterns of like the chord changes, et cetera, and could it generate the archetypal Iron Maiden riff from the whole database? Would you get the quintessential essence of Iron Maiden in a riff if you input all of these songs?
Yes and no.
Good question. Not necessarily so. Same as with Bach. You put all of Bach in, and you'll get something that sounds like Bach out.
But it's not.
But machines right now don't have emotions, or volition, or a consciousness, which is needed for that sort of creativity. The music will sound okay, but it's clearly isn't Bach.
And the same thing with any form of art, which has both an emotional and a social context.
Right.
So if you were to put the Sex Pistols and get an algorithm derived version of a punk band, it wouldn't have the social context. It wouldn't have the meaning, and people would just listen to it and go, "Well, so what?"
Well, the meaning of the music or the words. I think you mean the words.
Well, both actually.
Yeah, right. Well, both. I mean, there's a device now called GPT-3, Generative Pre-trained Transformer -3, and it was created at OpenAI, and it's created a real star, and that it is loaded with over 500 billion words. Meaning there aren't 500 billion words in the English language, but by 500 billion words, I mean words taken straight from the web, straight from everything, books. I mean, you name it. and it has 175 billion machine learning parameters, and it's a powerful natural language model, and it produces almost human-like prose. However, 50% of the prose it produces are wrong. It means it's wrong as much as it's right. It's wrong factually, which is not a big deal for fiction or certainly not for poetry, but for nonfiction it is. So, if you're reading a magazine, have you heard of it?
No, 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 no.
Well, if you're reading a magazine, a book, or a newspaper, and the author suddenly says, you wouldn't believe it, but the paragraph you just read was written by a machine. Well, sure, but that's about the sixth attempt. It's cherry-picked by a human editor who has cleaned it up. Eerily, the GPT's grammar is almost perfect. So the point is caveat emptor. It's not it doesn't yet have fluency in the English language. It's a statistical machine, picking out words that have a high probability of being the word you want, but not quite the word you want if you're writing literature. But it's very good for collaboration. For example, if you're a writer and you hit a writer's block, so you put that paragraph in as your prompt, the machine will continue along, and it may give you a good idea.
That's how footballers write their autobiographies, I guess.
I think so. Yeah,
Arthur,
fill in the word.
Arthur, listen, I want you to talk about something which I find fascinating. We were talking about Bach and that. Now, there's a thing which I've come across in one of your books called the Bach Test, in which an algorithm algorithm samples and basically dissects all the kind of the notes of that Bach ever wrote or something, and then kind of puts them together, deconstructs and puts them together, and comes up with a piece of Bach that it's or a take on Bach that it's written itself, and this is then put to a variety of listeners, and they then have to pick out which is the real Bach and which is the Bach which was reproduced by the machine. Is that right? And it's pretty good at fooling these listeners, isn't it?
It's good. It's good at fooling the average listener, but not the professional musician.
I was going to ask you about that. That's what I was going to ask you.
Because that little twiddle is gone. It isn't there. That grace note.
Yeah.
Isn't there. I used to do that when I first lectured on AI, and then I realized that this is rather ridiculous. Because, I mean, look, Bach has already been done by Bach. What do you need a machine to turn out this stuff for?
That begs the next question, actually. Is that are all of these AI activities at the moment kind of just sideshows?
No, not in art and writing. In music, to some degree, yes, but not in art and writing. Even in music, there are AI devices that can produce strange sounds that have never been heard before, owing to the fact that in an artificial neural network, it's numbers all the way down. Mm-hmm. So you have numbers in your stored away in your machine in this romantically called latent space, and then the machine puts the numbers together in strange ways. And with a device like GPT-3, but this will be GPT-18 probably, where you have numbers from encoding from pixels, say on Picasso paintings and so on, and numbers also from musical notes and numbers from words, and it may come to pass that it'll be interesting to see the machine produce on a 3D printer a statue or a statue for a piece of music or a symphony produced from Picasso's Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, something like that.
Yeah, but by the time we get to, let's say, the turn of the century, and human beings have started to morph with machines, and we're now developing a new league of artificial superintelligence, who would actually care about Picasso anymore? Who would actually care about any of these things? Because they'd be seen as archaic, surely. I mean, what is the entire concept of art, music, things that are pleasurable, will have changed? What's the concept going forward of what would be pleasurable to a human machine hybrid? I mean, reproduction, for example, it serves a biological function, but it's also highly pleasurable. Would things like that simply be evolved out of existence by machines?
Well, no. I mean, the notion of pleasure will be transformed, of course, because we'll be transformed. And up and coming now are sexbots, which will certainly transform human relations. There's no doubt about that.
Even
And
the sex
well,
bot
who
is
knows? Maybe
that's a red herring. That's just
no, it's not a red herring. Absolutely not. Who knows? Maybe artificial pleasure will be the real pleasure. I mean, just as well, you talk about Bach. Bach is from hundreds of years ago. Yet we still listen, and we even go further back to Gregorian chants, which are extremely interesting. And there will always be this classical repertoire. It will be like, well, who knew in BC that you were counting backwards? There will always be this classical repertoire. It will be pared down. Musical instruments will change. The whole notion of the concert will change. Getting people into hearing classical music is quite difficult these days, COVID aside. But sure, things will change in ways that we presently cannot imagine.
Do you know, Arthur, you mentioned sex bots there. I've got to ask this question. Bruce was going to ask it at some point, or I was. Whoever got in first, Bruce, I'm going to get in first. We've had this discussion whenever we go out for lunch or something. The conversation always comes around to this, Arthur, and that is, does it count? Right. Let's move things forward a little bit into the future. Let's say you had an affair with a sex bot. Does it count as infidelity? This is a question that Bruce and I have been discussing. So not that we've got any intentions of doing this, but
Very good. Today probably not. With today's mores, probably not.
Right.
Your wife or husband or whatever is your preference. Well, it's only a sex bot. It's just I mean, what could you really do with it? But in the future, I think it will be an issue.
Yeah.
When conceiving children, I don't think that women will carry their children any longer. They'll be in test tubes in some sort of artificial environment, artificial womb, and so on.
Okay.
So mores will change as well. I don't think that's why. Looking into the future, it will be considered. Might well be considered.
It will be, yeah.
But I mean, it may well. But who knows what the notion of marriage will be by that time? What the notion of spending one life with somebody else, when lifespans will increase by quite a bit. And that is a problem, an ethical and social problem in itself, because that will not apply to everyone out there. Certain class of people, their lifespan will expand, and they may live off the planet. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, morphing into machine-human hybrids is going to be for possibly a large, but nevertheless a large minority, select group of humans.
Right.
The rest of humanity is going to be consigned to their current world or worse. Is that the future?
Right. That may well be the future. We don't know yet, but certainly the future. And there you would need some autocratic regime, and we're unfortunately tending towards autocratic regimes right now. So it may not be a great future for everybody. I mean, and the select few, so to speak, one can imagine living off the planet, living in some giant spaceship circling around, or maybe Mars, who knows.
If we look at like emotion, development of emotions, we've got, and I know emotion researchers differ on this, but we've got 6 or 7 primary emotions, up to 30 complex or composite emotions. So presumably, if we kind of follow the logic through and, machines become more intelligent, more creative, eventually there's a possibility that they might also start developing emotions. And arguably different emotions to the ones that we know of at the moment as human beings.
As I said before, machines have a different physiology.
Yeah.
From us, so there's no reason why they can't develop some other sort of emotions that we can't even imagine right now. But who knows?
Yeah, they might even develop an emotion, just for dealing with humans.
Right.
There's that. I think I read a few months ago that dogs have this kind of particular kind of eyebrow configuration that they've evolved in their interactions with humans to get stuff out of us, basically. I'm just wondering, actually, scroll forward, however hundreds of years, we might have computers that have a completely different range of emotions to the ones that we have now. And some of them might have developed or evolved specifically to deal with us.
Right. I mean, that will come at a time when machines start building themselves, self-replicating machines, so to
Right.
speak.
So when you get a self-replicating machine, what's the purpose of having any human input into it at all?
That's right. That side of things will be taken away from us.
Yeah, I mean, there is none. There is no human input. Why would machines, if there's no human input in a machine, I mean, fundamentally, why would machines be interested, self-generating machines?
Oh, right. Yes. Okay.
Why would they be interested in anything
right.
which is human at all?
That's right. I mean, I think there'll be three strands of looking at the art world. It'd be three strands going on. One is people doing old conventional art, flat art, as sometimes called derisively, oil painting and things like that. They'll eventually be gone. That will not be preferable any longer. Then there'll be humans working with machines, humans who are part machine, and machines working along on their own. And it may well be the case that machines will have to explain their literature to us, and we may even enjoy it.
Yeah.
I mean, machines will be looking along your line, will be producing work for us and also for their brethren.
I mean, what the if you pardon the pun, the picture you're painting is one in which humanity really is basically becomes an irrelevance in effect, because if from the perspective of being a self-generating machine, I can see no useful purpose in having human beings around. They're messy and untidy, and
Well, by that time, what it is to be a human being will have been very much dramatically transformed from what it is now.
maybe for the elite, but maybe not for billions of people.
Not for billions of people, but let's say that just looking at that cut of people who it will be, that may not they may die out in that they have part human characteristics, human physiology, and the only thing that may be left will be machines. And it will be machines that will go out into the universe and investigate. So there's a good chance that if ETs land on Earth, there'll be machines.
Arthur, can I flip it a little bit and just ask this question? I mean, at the moment where we are in terms of understanding human creativity, the process is, there's a whole literature out there, a whole, bunch of researchers, yourself included, that are trying to understand the processes of human creativity. And it's very poorly understood, as I think you'll agree. So let's flip the question a little bit. Can research into artificial creativity, machine creativity, as it progresses, actually help us understand what's going on in our own heads, and explain, perhaps shed a bit more light on our own creativity?
I would say yes, absolutely. Yeah, at first in the 70s and 80s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, the big thing was to have machines understand human creativity and discuss the human brain as if it were an information processing device.
Yeah.
But actually, the payoff was going the other way, to design computers to loosely emulate the human brain. So yes, right now, especially since neuroscience is becoming closer and closer aligned with computer science. So yes, I think research in computer creativity will help us to understand how the brain works and help us to understand our own creativity.
So the question, which is on the basis of that, which I agree with, actually, I mean, on the basis of that, I mean, I'm just trying to think, just follow the argument through and come to a kind of a tantalizing kind of proposition. I mean, if as you say, computers and machines are going to, generally, become more creative, they're going to be able to generate emotions, possibly emotions different, more sophisticated than our own, and they're going to be super intelligent and solve problems better than us. I mean, at what point would we, or does it even make sense to ask this question, at what point would we describe them as being alive? Or does the sense of what being alive means just change dramatically as we move into the future?
Yes, it's not really a cop out to say that, yes, what it means to be alive will change drastically as we move into the future.
Mm.
Machines will make us more creative.
Yeah,
And so we could work along another track,
yeah,
and working together can produce interesting work. Like right now, the collaboration between, say, teams of medical scientists and artificial neural networks have produced
mm.
hypotheses that are far wider and deeper concerning COVID and how to deal with it than teams of scientists working alone. So yeah, you have machines and human slash machines working together, and each complementing the other, because machines will be thinking along their particular line by that point,
Yeah.
which may be wider and deeper than ours, but we can get something into this situation too.
So do you think? I mean, this is the tantalising proposition that when I was really looking forward to talking to you, and I was just thinking to myself, what kind of directions the conversation would take. I mean, given what you've just said, then, do you think it's possible that hundreds of years down the line, however long it takes, like super intelligent machines will, just like nearly every human civilization, develop some kind of sense of the numinous of God? Will they have their own kind of belief in a deity? That pretty much every kind of human civilization has evolved. I mean, and
Well,
would it tell us anything about our own concept of God?
well, I don't know. They may be too rational to have any concept of God.
Yeah, but would they question
Yeah.
if they're rational? Would the question of what's the purpose of our existence occur to them?
It may well, yeah. They would become philosophical machines. I mean, why not? They will be jam packed with every bit of human knowledge that has accrued on the planet Earth. So why not? Alchemy, mysticism, numerology. So sure, they may wonder about those questions, but then they may also come to the conclusion, being a materialist, since they are material, we are material too, but we seem to think that what we have goes beyond atoms and molecules. But they may come to the conclusion that many people have come to, that at the end the lights go out and that's it. And for them, well, they know how life began in some factory or other, and they know that it doesn't have to end for them. This is another interesting point: is that life doesn't have to end for them.
No, because they can replace and upgrade.
Replacement parts,
yeah,
and so can we. In the future, we'll have nanobots that will go into our system and clean up everything and tumors, etc. But what we have to get around is this notion of have to get into this notion that aging is a disease that can be cured, and so in principle, and so in practice too, we can go on forever, and certainly with machines it will be much easier. And Blade Runner, for example, there are very nice examples in there of replicons that have wet insides rather than wire insides.
Yeah.
What's the role in human society? We have lots of divisions that are, political divisions, different philosophies of how, of governance, of societies, of groups, of individuals, units, whatever you want to call it, countries, cities, towns. In future world of artificial superintelligence, does all that go out of the window, or would there be rivalries? Because if the whole thing has evolved from human machine interactions, and that's somehow built into the database, the software, the algorithm, whatever you want to call it, are we just recreating all the problems of the old world, but in a race of super intelligent beings?
Well, maybe that's the only scenario one can have. I mean, certainly machines will be competitive. They're competitive now. There have been experiments done that show competition amongst machines. There was an experiment done by a group of roboticists at l'École Polytechnique Fédérale in Lausanne, where they did very, very simple robots, and they look like hockey pucks, and they programmed them to forage for food. And it was found that some time down the line, and there were hundreds of robots involved in this, that small groups of them shielded their visual communication from other groups in order to hoard food. So machines can lie, can deceive. They have which are emotions. I mean, there's survival of the fittest amongst machines too.
Listen, talking about bringing it more down to a more prosaic and pragmatic level, and kind of human-machine interaction. I've been following the development and the debate surrounding driverless cars with great interest. Of course, what's interesting about driverless cars, I mean, they're already here. But what I find really interesting is the kind of the moral dimension that's being built into this, and like if you've got a driverless car, and it's got a choice between, I don't know, ploughing into a pregnant
the trolley car problem.
Yeah, the old trolley problem. How do we get around this kind of moral dilemma of who to save? If you've got an elderly person or a pregnant woman, you've got to program the algorithm in. I mean, do you do any work on this? Have you been? Well, you've obviously been following it, but what's your take on this?
It's sort of like philosophy 101.
Yeah,
I saw a panel once, and a very authoritative woman from Google and also from Imperial, and whose opinions I follow. And when that trolley car problem was brought up, she said, let's just go on to something else. I mean, we don't encounter that.
Yeah.
There's no reason why what people who do encounter that sort of thing are jet pilots flying fighter bombers.
Yeah.
And it has happened. It happens as much as once a year.
Yeah.
It could, that the engine cuts out, and should the person bail out, he's over a city, should he bail out and let the plane crash into the city, or go down with the plane? And the pilot always goes down with the plane.
Yeah.
And dies. So that's the only situation. The poor car, it just wouldn't encounter that sort of situation. Have you driven it? Have you been in a driverless car?
I haven't been into a driverless car. Just for the sake of our listeners, actually,
it's really weird.
I was just about to explain very quickly what the trolley problem is. So you've got a train hurtling down a track. In its path, you've got 5 people trapped on the line. You can flick a switch which diverts the train down a fork in that track, killing just the one person instead of the 5. Would you flick the switch? That's basically the trolley problem. And that
one person happens to be your wife.
That's right. And then you can mess around with who that one person is, who the 5 people are. They could be 5 heinous criminals. The one person could be your wife, etc., etc. And there's all kinds of variations on that. Very interesting actually about the now I know that'll interest Bruce, because Bruce is a pilot, aren't you, Bruce?
No, I am.
Not that you've ever probably faced that dilemma that Arthur was talking about there, though.
No, but I know quite a few jet pilots who've had to eject, and with an engine failure, and all of them would eject. This whole thing about the pilot was trying to divert the aircraft away at the last minute and things like that. I've spoken to a few pilots, and just before they eject, they said, no, the reason I ejected was I had no control over the aircraft anymore. It was just, there was no point in me dying with the aircraft if there was nothing I could do to affect the outcome of where it was going to go.
Well, where was that person flying? Was he flying over a city or what?
Well, flying over anywhere, basically. I mean, because
really?
And it's the same question with pilots who have light aircraft accidents and things like that. That you get very little choice about where to go, and you can't actually eject in any case.
Just to highlight something, a kind of a wider issue, which kind of we've been circling around. So, I mean, at some point, as machines and computers evolve, if that's the right word, and we touched on that little debate earlier. And you say have a trolley, let's say, machines become super intelligent, develop emotions or whatever at some point, and we get a kind of a trolley problem scenario, which we don't encounter in real life. We know that, but let's just set it up. You've got, I don't know, 1 human against 5 robots. And you've got to kind of divert the train or whatever. If these robots or machines are more intelligent than us, if they're more creative than us, if they're more empathic than us, I don't know. I
Must have
mean,
consciousness.
yeah, absolutely.
Then
I
they can
mean,
feel pain.
yeah, well, yeah. I mean, yeah, which comes on to the question of rights, which I'm kind of getting onto in a roundabout way. At what point? I mean, could you envisage a scenario? It's in some point in the future. I'm not saying it's necessarily dystopian, but some kind of scenario in the future where actually we might be sacrificing humans, whatever humans might be in that
That's
time,
right. Yeah, whatever it might be.
to preserve robotic intelligence. Do you think is that totally beyond the bounds of possibility? Do you think?
Arthur C. Clarke is turning in his grave right now.
Oh,
I, Robot.
yeah, right,
You know?
right. Oh, that's definitely possible. Definitely a possibility where
Yeah,
you have sentient beings who can feel pain, even though they're. I mean, what a robot is anyway will undergo change as well because they will be
sure.
in machines in human-like bodies.
Why? Why would a machine adopt something so imperfect as a human-like body?
Well, to be like everybody else, who knows what we will look like by then anyway. But to be like to be like everyone else, to have a homogenous society.
Yeah, but there's so many limitations on the human body. I mean, I'm not sure why a machine would try and replicate that.
I'll tell you
Oh
something
well,
though. I'll
there.
tell you something though, Bruce. It would be.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't wait to tune into the Olympic Games in 500 years.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
Sure,
we're
yeah.
going to have a whole new set of world records, aren't we, Arthur?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well,
Well, you have to have an asterisk next to it. Yeah.
rather pointless world
Well,
records,
Bruce, you'll never, you're fencing. What you consider fencing. Bruce is a very keen fencer, Arthur. I mean, you'll be
Oh, really?
fencing with a machine that basically, I don't know, disarms you, whatever it is, in seconds. I mean,
Yes,
Well, it'll be humans versus humans and machines versus machines.
yeah, no, exactly. There will be humans. I mean, it's sport. I mean, sport will become. Well, it kind of is a form. It's largely the opium for the masses at the moment. So I mean, it's entertainment.
Yeah.
Fundamentally now it's entertainment in any
Yes.
mainstream sort of arena. So humans, it would be entertaining to watch human beings fight, have a good, I'm sure the machines would all have center stage.
Machines
They'd
would
have a
enjoy
good
it.
chuckle.
Yeah,
They'd
that's
have a
right.
good chuckle about it. Gladiatorial combat.
And of course, human versus machine is just out of the question.
No.
I mean, in terms of our passion, Arthur, we both chess aficionados. I mean, I've often thought actually, I mean, I'm wondering whether every single variation on a chessboard has pretty much been reached. This debate's been going on for quite a while. I mean, now openings can be played up to 30, right through into the middle game, 25, 30 moves, some opening variations. And,
Yeah.
Arguably chess performance is based a lot on working memory now. And
Right.
the degree to which you can remember previous variations of previous games. I mean, in however many years, do you think with the advancement of machine intelligence and that, do you think that actually some pastimes like chess, for example, will die because actually every possible best alternative move will be exhausted and annotated? Or do you think it's heading that way now anyway?
Perhaps, well, actually not. People are learning how to play better from machines.
Yeah. Okay.
Kasparov, when first he was very much against machines, and now he has a whole line of chess playing machines.
Yeah.
So, no, I think machines may get bored, but humans will get bored.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, of course, there are these contests in which you have human and machine collaborating.
Yeah.
But humans will always lose against the machine.
Arthur, I want to ask you. We touched on earlier about the Turing test, which of course is a very well-known test. There's this test called the Lovelace test, isn't it? Which was developed by the philosopher, computer scientist Ada Lovelace, wasn't it? In which for a computer, I think a computer has to generate an output which is not predictable from the algorithmic input. I think that's her kind of criterion for what she regards as like the benchmark of creativity. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the Lovelace test has been looked into in recent years by a guy named Riedel at Georgia Tech or University of Georgia.
Yeah, and we're beyond that now. So a lot of machines are now passing the Lovelace test.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
Even in music, particularly. But you can always fake a machine out in one way or another and say who is pitching for the Boston Red Sox on such and such a day.
Yeah.
And it might not know that. So you're dealing with either dealing with a machine or somebody who doesn't know anything about sports. So even that doesn't work.
Yeah.
But you can cheat on a Turing test.
Yeah, I mean, music's. I keep coming back to music. It's really interesting because there was I think there was a legal case which was just settled a few weeks ago. I think Ed Sheeran, and there was like a copyright plagiarism case where someone was saying that Ed Sheeran had ripped off a piece of work or a song or something like that, and I think the verdict went in Ed Sheeran's favour. And Ed Sheeran had actually come out and said that, look, there's only 8 notes out there. They can only be combined in, a finite number of forms, and there's bound to be some kind of repetition, some kind of similarity in the normal course of creativity. I mean, if we look at, machine creativity in music, I mean, do you see that actually there will come a point when every single sequence of notes and chord and song or tune has been, composed, or, that we've come up with it? Or do you think that actually, machines will be able to, by creating new sounds, new combinations of sounds, will be able to extend the life of musical creativity?
Oh, yes, absolutely. You have a finite number of notes, and then you have keys, and so on, and it's amazing what you can do with them. I think that will be expanded on and expanded on. There'll be something new coming out all the time, especially with machines producing music.
Well, it's I don't know about you, Bruce. It's absolutely fascinating talking to you.
Yeah, same here. Thank you very much.
It really has. So, what are you working on right now? What's the focus of your research and your own creative endeavors right now?
Well, I'm continuing along with AI, but I've also written a play, which had a reading in New York City last week, and it was very well received. So I have to make some adjustments on that.
And what's the title of the play, Arthur?
The title of the play is Synchronicity, and it's based on my book 137 about the interaction between Carl Jung and Carl Jung, the famous psychologist, and Wolfgang Pauli, the brilliant physicist. Pauli came to Jung in 1931 as pretty much disintegrated. He was an alcoholic. He was on drugs, and their relationship began as doctor and patient, then became colleagues, and then very close friends.
Arthur, it's been fantastic talking to you. Really, really brilliant.
Yeah, same here.
And I'm sure we're going to get a lot of comments on this because it's been truly fascinating.
Great. Well, thank you very much for inviting me.
Hello folks, we hope you're enjoying Psycho Schizo Espresso. Just to remind you, it's a PodProd production, so please feel free to like, subscribe and leave a review wherever you get your podcast. You can also reach out to us on email at pse@podprod.co.uk and follow us on social media on the hashtag Psycho Schizo Espresso. You can also, of course, become a Patreon by clicking on www.patreon.com/Psycho Schizo Espresso, where you can gain exclusive access to unedited and unfiltered content if your brain can possibly handle any more of me and Bruce.